Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to week number 11 of the Everything Ravens podcast. My name is Logan, and I'm the host of this podcast. I run the Instagram account at everything_Ravens, which is the biggest Ravens fan page on Instagram, sitting at almost 40,000 followers as we start this recording. Make sure you go hit up that page, give it a follow for Everything Ravens news. Also, make sure you follow at Everything Ravens podcast to get all the latest updates involving this podcast. So we've been doing this team series where we break down each of our upcoming matchups with different fan pages from different teams. We've already had the Eagles, the Redskins, and the Chiefs. This week, we are finally getting to the division. We are going to interview a Bengals fan page. So we are interviewing Braden at Bengals_NFL. So introduce yourself.
Like you said, I'm Braden. I run Bengals_NFL on Instagram. Nearly at 20,000 followers. I've been running the page since 2015 and obviously follow the Bengals close, and excited to talk some Bengals today, give you guys some insight on what the team's looking like, give some stuff maybe Ravens fans might not know about.
And Brooks and Kyrie were both unable to join us this week. We hope to have them back next week, but we will actually be having Spencer, who you guys remember from a few weeks back, helped us with the pod. He will be filling in this week for both of them.
What's up, guys? Excited to be back. Happy to talk some Ravens football. This has always been a good rivalry between the Ravens and the Bengals, and it's looking like it's trending upwards with the addition of Joe Burrow, so I'm really excited to talk about it.
So the Ravens and the Bengals, AFC North matchup. It's always a tough game with Cincinnati. Maybe not last year just because the Bengals were just terrible, but no matter normally how bad the Bengals are, they have always been a thorn in our side. Like, I always have hated playing the Bengals just because they just have a way to beat us. Like, AJ Green's called the Ravens killer for a reason. Tyler Boyd, I don't really want to talk about that play, but we obviously know what happened there. The Bengals have just always had our number. So what are your guys' thoughts on this matchup?
As of now, I still don't see a situation this year where the Bengals can beat the Ravens, even though I do think the Bengals are going in the right direction. Obviously, with the addition of Joe Burrow, that's a big upgrade over Andy Dalton, and bringing guys like T. Higgins, AJ Green, as is now healthy, and as you said, he's known as the Ravens killer. Tyler Boyd's always been pretty productive against you guys, and a lot of what we did on defense, I think, was mainly to stop Lamar Jackson. We brought in DJ Reader to put him next to Geno Atkins, really beefing up that defensive line. Then we went heavy with the linebackers in the offseason. We signed Josh Bynes, who you guys are obviously very familiar with, as he was with you guys last year. And we also drafted Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither, both who are very athletic. Akeem Davis-Gaither, he's very versatile. He played some box safety, played some will, some Mike. He's even lined up on the edge a few times at Appalachian State. So he's the type of guy with the athleticism you need to stop Lamar Jackson. Logan Wilson's kind of your prototypical Mike linebacker, sideline to sideline ability, above average speed, good coverage, which will fare well against a guy like Mark Andrews. So when I look at what they're doing, I think they're building the defense to stop Lamar Jackson, because the few times the Bengals have played Lamar Jackson has made the Bengals defense look drunk.
Yeah, going off of that point, if you listen to the intro of this pod, the He Is Houdini, that came from the Bengals. Like, probably the best play or the most memorable play in all of NFL last year, where Lamar completely broke Nick Vigil's ankles with that nasty spin move. It's like pressing the B button on Madden. That was against the Bengals when we blew them out. It was like 52-10 or something like that.
Yeah, that was a fun game. I think I agree with Brendan. I don't know really if the Bengals have too good of a shot at beating the Ravens next year. I just think that's a testament to how good the Ravens are. But I think, down the road, this is going to be a really, really intense rivalry. Joe Burrow, I mean, the dude had one of the greatest quarterbacking seasons as a college player. And I think he's the type of quarterback that if you no matter what system you put him in, he's going to succeed. So if the Bengals front office can continue to surround Joe Burrow with excellent offensive talent, I mean, as they already have, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, and build a defense that's really built to stop Lamar Jackson, I can see this really being a fierce rivalry over the next 10 or so years.
So we first play Cincinnati in week 5, and by that time there will probably not be a ton of game film on Joe Burrow, being that he is a rookie and has not played very long. But I think one thing that will really help us out with game planning for Joe Burrow is the fact that we have Patrick Queen on our team, and if anyone knows Joe Burrow really well and his tendencies, it would be Patrick Queen, because Patrick Queen was the Mike linebacker for the LSU defense. He went up against Joe Burrow every day in practice, so he could probably give us a lot of helpful insight on Joe Burrow with that limited game film going into that week 5 game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, especially now during COVID, we might not have a preseason. That's up in the air now. We don't know what's happening with that. That's less game film that we'll have on Joe Burrow. So having Patrick Queen quarterbacking our defense, guy like you said, who went up against him every day of practice, I think that gives us a bit of an unfair advantage that we already have over the Bengals.
Yeah, so I think with Joe Burrow, you're going to see the Bengals run a lot of 11 personnel, but they're going to mix it in more of LSU and Joe Brady's offense to fit. The Bengals asked Joe Burrow to send him his 10 favorite plays during his combine interview. So I think we're going to see a lot of that implemented, but I think we're going to see some more spread concepts, a little less 12 personnel. I don't think Joe Burrow is going to be a big fan of having 2 tight ends on the field. Obviously, he had a good connection with Thaddeus last year, but the Bengals really don't have a big tight end receiving threat. CJ Uzomah, he's your average tight end, and Drew Sample, who the Bengals spent a second-round pick on for some reason. He only played in a few games last year before he ended up on the IR, and during the preseason, and when he did play, he didn't really show the Bengals coaches or fans anything to be excited about. But I think the Bengals are going to have a lot of 11 personnel spread concepts, kind of let Joe Burrow find who he wants to throw the ball to. That's what he did so well at LSU, is just that ability to read the defense, read the coverage, and quickly finding the best possible receiver to throw to.
In my opinion, one guy who I think Joe Burrow could actually have a pretty good connection with is Tyler Boyd, because you saw at LSU last year he had a really good connection with Justin Jefferson, and Tyler Boyd and Justin Jefferson are similar in a lot of ways where they do most of their work out of the slot. So I think Tyler Boyd could probably have maybe the best season of his career working with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. Tyler Boyd, he obviously had a very good connection with Andy Dalton, as I'm sure you guys are aware of. But something that Andy Dalton had that habit of, which is I'm sure you guys are also well aware of as of now, playing us throughout Andy Dalton's career in Cincinnati, was Dalton doesn't exactly put the receivers in the best scenario, and that goes for all receivers. Screen, John Ross, when Tyler Eifert was still on the team. So there are a lot of times where Tyler Boyd was bailing Andy Dalton out, and he was losing yards because he had to slow down on his route instead of Andy Dalton hitting him in stride. And obviously Joe Burrow, very accurate passer, and if he can hit Tyler Boyd in stride, those yards can rack up and the offense can keep going. So I think that's just something small that Joe Burrow is going to help with this offense.
Yeah, I think Joe Burrow will definitely give our secondary a challenge. I don't know exactly how good he's going to be as a rookie, but I feel like in a few years he could be a really good quarterback in the NFL.
I could see Joe Burrow taking the Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes path to stardom in the NFL, where in the first year they're all right, but in the second year they absolutely take the league by storm. I mean, he's just that caliber of player in my eyes. The dude is a monster. He must have played point guard or something in high school, because his spatial recognition and just sports IQ is off the charts. I mean, it's the same type of caliber that you see from a 10-year NFL vet, and he's got it at the age of 22, 23. I mean, I have really high praise for Joe Burrow, and I'm really scared that he's on the Bengals. Even though I do think Joe Burrow will play better than your average rookie quarterback, he's still going to run into a lot of issues. Obviously, he's in a pretty tough division. Both the Steelers, Ravens, and Browns all have tough defenses, all have great defensive lines, and the Bengals' offensive line is probably the weak point on the team. Obviously, they have Jonah Williams coming back, who missed all of his rookie year, so you basically have a rookie left tackle, and even though he was pretty polished coming out of Alabama, he's going to have
some rust coming back from an injury, not playing for over a year, and also the fact that he's a rookie, still going to have to make that transition into the NFL. So I think that's going to run into some issues. And then you have second-year guard Michael Jordan, who for the most part struggled towards the end of the season last year. He showed some improvements, especially week 17 against the Browns on a Joe Mixon touchdown run. He completely bullied one of the Browns linebackers into the back of the end zone. Kind of looked like Michael Orr from The Blind Side. I think you guys know what scene I'm talking about. So there's definitely some hope for Michael Jordan, but at the same time, there was a lot more negatives than positives, so he's still a question mark. Trey Hopkins is, as of now, really the only reliable offensive lineman for the Bengals. The Bengals gave him a 3-year extension towards the end of last year, so he'll be with the team for 3 more years. He's a above average center. I would say he's not great, but he does his job. He's reliable, so you really don't have to worry about him. Then the right side of the offensive line is a bit of a mess. Both right guard and right tackle, it's kind of a free game. The Bengals signed Xavier Su'a-Filo in the offseason. He was the 33rd overall pick in the 2014 draft. Obviously, he hasn't panned out as the Texans hoped. He was with the Cowboys last year. He filled in for Connor Williams when Williams wasn't playing, and he wasn't terrible, and he does fit what the Bengals like to do with a lot of zone running concepts, but he hasn't been a true starter. So I think it's a little not ideal. If you're counting on him to be starter, then the right tackle scenario is not looking good. It's looking as if Bobby Hart's going to start yet again, but there's still a chance Fred Johnson could start. With the whole Cordy Glenn debacle last year, Fred Johnson got a lot of playing time at left tackle towards the end of the year, and he showed a lot of promise. But the reason I still think Bobby Hart's going to start is the Bengals were playing Johnson at left tackle instead of right side, and the Bengals offensive line coach, Jim Turner, he really seems to like Bobby Hart. So I still think Bobby Hart's going to start, but depending on how the rest of the offseason goes, training camp, if Fred Johnson can play well in the preseason, if there is one, and Bobby Hart struggles, I do think there's a scenario where Johnson can start on the right side, and that's who I'm pulling for to start. But if I had to guess, Bobby Hart's probably starting on that offensive line, and that's not ideal for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think the Ravens with Wink Martindale, he loves the blitz. And what he especially loves to do is he especially loves to blitz young quarterbacks. So going into those Bengals games, he's definitely going to be throwing a lot of creative stuff at Joe Burrow, confusing him, making him uncomfortable. And like you said, with the Bengals with an uncertain offensive line, the Ravens really improved their defensive line this offseason, acquiring Calais Campbell, one of the best defensive linemen in the league, getting Derek Wolfe, a really solid pass rushing defensive lineman, as well as retaining Matthew Judon, which I think Matthew Judon gets a lot of slack from his fan base, but I feel like he can definitely improve with having the beefed up interior defensive line. And we also have Tyus Bowser, who's in his contract year. And we all know what happens with Ravens pass rushers in their contract year. So I think Tyus is going to have a big year too. So we'll see what happens in this game.
As I alluded to a little earlier, Joe Burrow's really good at reading defenses. As we saw that, he's really good at evading pressure, but at the same time, he's going into the NFL where defensive linemen and linebackers are going to be more athletic. So even though in college he got himself out of a lot of pressure and avoided a lot of sacks, I don't think that's just going to be a smooth transition. I think he's going to have to adjust to the athleticism he's going to see in the NFL. I think there was a few times in college where he evaded a few pass rushers, but if that was in the NFL, he probably would have been sacked just because the competition is so much more intense. But I am excited to see how Joe Burrow will fare against your defense and your guys' blitz packages, because that's something he thrived at. So that's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Joe Burrow against those blitz packages. I think we could really throw him off with those. And our secondary, I'm really excited to see our secondary against him with Tyler Boyd, A.J. Green, T. Higgins, Sean Ross. The Bengals do have a low-key really, really good wide receiver core. So I'm really excited to see our secondary go up against those 4 guys.
And speaking of John Ross, he's somebody who I think could greatly benefit from having Joe Burrow. Andy Dalton loved throwing the ball 10 yards out of bounds, regardless of who the receiver is. And John Ross, obviously, had that 4.22 speed, but Andy Dalton could really never seem to connect with him deep. Ross's success in the NFL the past few years have been more on those shorter routes and him exploding in open space. Dalton just didn't have chemistry with Ross, so Burrow can get that chemistry with Ross, and Ross can stay healthy and stay on the field. I think there can be a connection there, and there is a open up the offense because when you have a guy with that speed, you have to have a safety over him. Then you get that one-on-one matchup with AJ Green or Tyler Boyd, who are both legitimate targets and who can win on one-on-one situations more often than not. So the Bengals can really open up their offense if John Ross can stay healthy, and I think Joe Burrow can help John Ross take that next step.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. But we could talk about this Ravens-Bengals divisional matchup for a while, but let's get on to like more of league stuff. Braden, Spencer, who do you guys see as some of the biggest threats in the AFC besides the Ravens and the Chiefs, obviously?
I think you have to say the Texans, even though they had one of the worst off seasons I could remember in a while, just because of Deshaun Watson. Even though Bill O'Brien's one of the worst coaches, one of the worst general managers, Deshaun Watson's just an elite quarterback talent. When you have that elite quarterback talent, you find a way to win. We've seen that with Russell Wilson, the Seahawks, and the Texans. They've been quietly improving their offensive line, which should also help Deshaun Watson. And so I think the Texans are going to win their division. I think the Titans are going to have a big fall off year. So I could see the Texans making a legitimate push in the AFC this year.
Definitely got to agree with that. I'm looking at the Colts. I'm really afraid about that. With the addition of Phillip Rivers, I think that roster is really all around just amazing. And you can never count out Mike Tomlin and his Steelers. I think with Big Ben back, we'll see how he is. He's getting up in the years now, and he's coming off of an injury. But Big Ben has always been that guy. You can just never get him down. And so we'll see what happens with that. And then, of course, the Patriots. I mean, the addition of 2015 NFL MVP Cam Newton, obviously as well, he's coming off of injury, but with Bill Belichick at the helm, you can never count out the Patriots. So we'll see what happens, but those are my three teams to watch out for.
Kind of going off what you said with the Steelers are going to be a really interesting team to follow this year just because of their scenario. Personally, I think within the next year or two, they may be stuck in mediocre land. I think Roethlisberger's going to fall off enough to the point where the Steelers are still going to be winning the easy games that they should, but they're not going to be able to pull out and compete with teams like the Chiefs, Ravens, Texans, and they're just going to kind of be stuck in mediocre land like the Bengals have the past few years. And long they have Ben Roethlisberger, they're not going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But at the same time, we've seen Roethlisberger's health taking a dip. It'll be interesting to see how Roethlisberger comes back from his injury. So as of right now, I see the Steelers as a 500 team. But as you said, you can really never count out Mike Tomlin. He always finds a way. So I could still see the Steelers possibly getting a wild card spot this year, but I don't see them as a legitimate threat in the AFC.
Another AFC team I could see being really good, and I know I might get some flack for saying this, but the Browns. I actually am kind of worried about them. They bolstered up their offense. They got Austin Hooper. They got a new coach, and I think if they have a coach that will actually use their talents instead of just, I don't know, what Freddie Kitchens was doing. If they use their talents to their advantage, I think the Browns could actually be really good. Obviously, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. I mean, just looking at that lineup on paper, it's really scary. And if somebody uses them right, I think they're going to give defenses fits.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. And a big part of the Browns this year is going to be how Baker Mayfield plays going into year 3. We saw last year his play take a pretty big fall, and it just seemed like he didn't have chemistry with OBJ. And I'm sure going into their second year together, that'll improve. But to me, it's all about the coaching, how Stefanski, or however you say his name, can use their talents. And we know Freddie Kitchens was pretty terrible at it. So the Browns have actually found their head coach. They could absolutely be a threat.
Now going off on all of that, let's just review the draft classes because the draft is a really exciting topic still right now to see how all these rookies will play out. We've already talked about Joe Burrow quite a bit, but let's just review the Ravens Bengals draft class as well as some of the division draft classes.
Yeah, so obviously the Bengals, they picked with the first pick in every round. And second round, they took T. Higgins, the Clemson wide receiver who was a highlight reel with contested catches. So I think that's something to go well with Joe Burrow, especially in the red zone. But I am concerned about Higgins' athleticism. Even though his 40 time wasn't terrible with 4.54, he did not test well in agility and explosiveness drills. He tested in the 9th percentile with his short shuttle. So he's not going to find a lot of success on those quicker routes, on those slants, those ends, those curls. So that's something that kind of concerns me, and I don't think Higgins is going to be a future number one receiver. To me, he's a number two receiver. That's why I prefer a guy like Denzel Mims, who has that speed, who has that agility, that explosiveness to be a potential number one receiver. I think with Higgins, you have a pretty high floor but a pretty low ceiling.
Yeah, and going off of all that, the Bengals did not screw up the Joe Burrow pick. They got their quarterback of the future. I think T. Higgins, basically the Bengals have brought him in to potentially be the successor to A.J. Green. He probably won't be a number one receiver like A.J., as you said, but he could probably do a lot of similar things, be that go up, get it, big body type receiver. And then in the mid rounds, I really liked what the Bengals did. I thought Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither were both severely underrated linebackers. I actually had them rated above Malik Harrison in this draft class. So, and the Bengals linebackers are obviously an issue. Last year, they drafted that dude from North Carolina State. I forget his name, but he was all right as a rookie. They brought in Josh Bynes, obviously, this offseason. He played for us. He played all right for us last year, but they obviously could have improved the position. They double-dipped in those mid-rounds to get Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson. And then I also really liked the Khalid Kareem pick from Notre Dame. I thought he was a sleeper coming into the draft, and I think he could develop into a really solid pass rusher for them.
Actually, Kareem Khalid was probably my least favorite pick out of the Bengals draft, which could be a bit of a testament to how well the Bengals drafted this year. To me, Khalid, what you're seeing is what you're getting. I don't think he has much potential. I think his role in the NFL is going to be a rotational pass rusher. He really doesn't have the athleticism to be a true starter, in my opinion, but I know he was also playing, I think, with a bum shoulder last year, so that obviously affects you, especially on the defensive line and countering pass rush moves. So that'll be something to watch, but I don't have a lot of high expectations for Kareem Khalid.
And Braden, what's your thoughts on the Ravens draft class?
Pains me to say it, but I think you guys hit it out of the ballpark. I was really mad when you guys took Patrick Queen. He was somebody who I was really hoping would fall to pick 33. I liked Queen over Kenneth Murray by quite a bit. He's going to be a really good linebacker in the NFL, and one of your guys' problem last year was linebackers, so you got an instant starter, instant upgrade in him. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be amazing in your guys' offense. I think he's going to fit really well for Lamar Jackson and your power running offense. So I think that's going to be a really nasty combination for years to come, and I'm not looking forward to playing that twice a year. Malik Harrison, and I'm an Ohio State fan, he was somebody who I honestly wasn't overly high on. I think rotational linebacker playing base defense, but I think he's going to struggle in a lot of pass coverage situations. I think he's just going to be a bit behind, even though he did test a lot better than I expected at the combine. I just don't see that on the film. So I don't know if it was a coaching thing at Ohio State and there's more untapped potential there. So I think and you guys obviously have some of the best coaches in the NFL. If there's anybody who can untap Harrison's potential, it's you guys. So I think there's definitely a chance for him to be a really effective player in the NFL, but with Harrison, I don't know. I just wasn't a big fan of him coming into the NFL and the NFL draft. Then Devin Duvernay, the Texas wide receiver, I thought that was a really another good pick for you guys. Obviously, I think he's going to do a lot out of the slot. Texas, and I think he just fits really well with Lamar Jackson and what you're looking to do. And I think Justin Matabuke, the Texas A&M defensive line, was a great pick for y'all. I feel like he's really going to help your guys' edge rush, like Judon, Bowser, and obviously he's going to help Campbell take some pressure off. So you guys have really boosted your defensive line with that pick, and that's going to give a lot of teams issues, especially the Cincinnati Bengals. And with Tyree Phillips, honestly don't know a ton amount, but I don't think he's going to be doing much his rookie year. But again, you guys seem to develop offensive linemen really well, so I could absolutely see a future where he's starter. Then Ben Brenson, the Michigan guard, I personally don't see much potential with him. I feel like he'll be a career backup. And with Broderick Washington, he's a really smart defensive lineman. I feel like he's going to kind of be like Kareem Khalid in the sense where he's mostly going to be a rotational guy. There's probably still some untapped potential, but I don't have too much hope for him being a starter. Then I really like James Prock, the SMU receiver. I feel like he's one of the more underrated receivers going into the draft. So I feel like he could really benefit from Lamar Jackson, and I feel like he could definitely have a year one role on your guys' offense. Then I also really liked the Geno Stone pick, the safety out of Iowa. I thought him going round 7 was a big steal, and even though he won't be starting, I feel like he could definitely have an impact on special teams year one, be an effective rotational player, and still have a pretty decent impact as a rookie, especially for a 7th round guy.
Alrighty, so I think this is going to basically wrap this up for this pod. Do you guys have any final words?
Not much other than it's going to be a really interesting year this year in the NFL, obviously with COVID and all the stadium restrictions. But to me, the Bengals still aren't a legitimate threat in the NFL yet. I still think they're at least 2 years away, but I definitely think with the addition of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson, ADG, I think the Bengals are going in the right step. And I think the Bengals are, like I said earlier in the episode, are building to beat the Ravens, which is a testament of how good and how powerful Lamar Jackson, your coaching staff, is.
Do you guys have any score predictions for the Week 5 at Ravens game and Week 17 in Cincinnati game?
For Week 5, I think the Ravens will win by 2, maybe 3 possessions or scores. I think at that point, Joe Burrow is still going to be relatively young in the NFL, still adjusting. So, and that's going to be a really hard matchup for him. Week 17, honestly, that depends. You guys may be sitting your starters because you have the 1 seed lock, depending on how it goes. So for Week 17, it really just depends how your guys' season goes and how our season goes, and depends on who's playing and who's healthy.
Yeah, like Braden said, Week 17 really just depends on certain scenarios because nobody knows who's going to be playing or not in that Week 17 game. As for the Week 5 game, I think the Ravens, I'm going to say like 27-17, somewhere around there. I think the Bengals will play us closer than what they did last year, but I still think we'll win. But the Bengals, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, they're always challenged to face.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think with the addition of Joe Burrow, hopefully the rivalry can get back on the right track. Obviously, the past few years, it's been sided to the Ravens, and the Bengals haven't given you guys much trouble, but hopefully that'll change. The games will get a little better. This year, Ryan Finley won't be playing against you guys, so hopefully there won't be another 50-10 game.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this rivalry going forward. You guys obviously have been the source of some of my biggest heartbreaks as a Raven fan the last few years at least. And I'm really scared about Joe Burrow going up these next few years.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to watch. But as I said earlier, as of now, I don't think the Bengals are going to be much of a threat to you. I could definitely see a scenario where the Bengals are playing you guys tougher than what the media is expecting. But I just don't see a scenario where the Bengals can beat the Ravens this year, unless if it's Week 17, you guys are sitting your starters.
That's all we have for this week, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We're looking forward to bringing you more episodes of this podcast each and every Friday. You can also listen to the show on all your favorite streaming services, including Apple Music, Spotify, and any of the other podcast apps you may listen to, such as CastBox, Podcast app, Google Podcasts. It's going to be available on all those apps, so we have you covered. Make sure to leave a review and follow the pod to stay up to date on the latest stay up to date on all the latest updates for this pod. The Instagram handle for it, once again, is at Everything Ravens Podcast. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Everything_Ravens. A big shout out goes to Chiefs Direct and Chiefs.Hive, Sam and Matt, for helping us do this podcast today. They were both excellent. Also, another shout out goes to Brooks and Kyrie for making the podcast run smoothly. They are great co-hosts each and every week. Make sure to follow them. Their handles are in the bio of at Everything Ravens Podcast. Also, a big shout out to Spencer Silverstein, our executive producer. He's the hardest worker here. He does a fantastic job making sure this podcast can run smoothly for your entertainment. He does all the dirty work, the behind the scenes stuff. Make sure to edit this, get this podcast up and running. Also, make sure to follow Jack Davis, our music producer, at I'm Jack Average on Instagram. All of their handles should be in the bio of Everything Ravens Podcast. Thank you guys once again for listening. You guys are a huge reason why this podcast can keep going the way it does. So have a good day and go Ravens.
They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
No copyright intended. All content rights go to their respective owners.